As a student involved in the land development process, which includes urban planning, land planning, civil engineering, real estate, land surveying, architecture, landscape architecture, construction management, and much more, LandMentor provides you with a unique opportunity to expand your future by providing you with both technology and training, not just to compete on par with others, but expedite your career path to a leadership position. This series of videos will give you an insight on why this system is so revolutionary, not just from a technical advantage, but demonstrate an entirely new way to think. So what's most important, do you think? The city or the developer or builder's desires? Because cities don't build. Developers and builders build. Cities regulate. And in your career path, you're going to be on one side or the other of that table, representing either the city or the developer builder. So let's talk about the process of development. We start with the farmer or rancher that has the piece of land. A developer wants to develop it, so they're going to contract with that rancher or farmer. That developer is going to go to either a civil engineer or an architect acting as a land planner to design a subdivision or development or commercial center on that piece of land. That consultant will look at the regulations that are in place, and his job is to squeeze every meter or square foot out of that piece of land and convince the city and the public that this meets the city regulations, and that's how the land is subdivided. That is the process of development. It varies a little bit in the U.S. That process to convince the city to develop has to go through public presentations. In other nations, if it meets the regulations, it just gets approved. But basically, that's the process worldwide. So, what we're looking at is the elements that are on the right side of the paper of the screen as we're talking about what changes we can do. So, every city has a series of regulations. In the U.S., every city will have a purpose and intent. Other nations, most of them do have a purpose and intent. This is from Iowa City as an example. There's standard boilerplate wording that could be found in these regulations, and they're pretty much unchanged for about a century, 100 years. What achieves those above goals? Afterwards, there's a set of minimum standards. There's nothing else, which is why you get this monotonous, cookie-cutter, minimal development. That is the way the cities grow. That's the way the world's developed. So who determines these minimums? Well, a lot of them are safety, federal, state, government, national regulations. And a lot of them are based on engineering standards. In the U.S., the engineering standards have not changed very much since 1954 Engineering Handbook, with the exception of environmental changes mostly in the drainage standards. But basically, we're using, in 2017, 1954 standards. But most of the regulations are based on emotion. I don't want lots that small. I don't want to be that close with my neighbor. I don't want to have no yard for my kids to play. I don't want a tower next to my building. Most of it is emotional, and most of it is replicated boilerplate regulations. So how's technology fit in? And again, we're talking about LandMentor, but most technology simply takes the minimums. This is an example of one of the systems on the market. And you put in the minimums on the computer, your building pads, whatever, and those are listed in the regulations. Once you have the minimums in, as you sweep your mouse close to the property lines, they'll snap into the minimums. Now this is sped up double the speed just for convenience, but you're looking at a 200% speed increase. But essentially and there's various packages that do about the same thing, but essentially in 2 minutes or 120 seconds, there's a 162 lot subdivision that will be designed to the regulatory minimums. If it's designed to the regulatory minimums, if it's outside the U.S. and doesn't have to have public scrutiny, you put a stamp on it and you build it. In the United States, the process will still have to go through all the public scrutinies, and maybe in a month or two, or maybe with environmental concerns in 4 or 5 years, it will be a development. But it will get approved. Why? Because it meets the minimum. So assuming on those lots a family's going to move in, and just let's assume 3.5 people, home sells on average in the U.S. once every 6 years. And so in a century, that means rounded roughly 17 times in a century, that home will be sold 17 times in 100 years, or 16.666 for rounding out numbers. So if 162 lots times 3.5 people will initially house around 570 people, 570, 600. Now, in that 120 seconds. So again, a home sells 17 times in a century. So rounded off, it will affect the living standards of 10,000 people. So the time to design per lot was 3/4 second per family, or time to design per person in that century is 0.01 second per person who will live in that project. And again, it will get built like it's shown because it meets the standards. That's how technology fits in. That's what we have done with technology today. There was no time to think about curb appeal, premium views, reduction of monotony. How are you going to walk about the neighborhood? Who cares? You just simply followed the streets. Environmental impact. Who cares? Profits? The developer said, well, I got my units on that side. I got 162 units. I am making a profit. Not necessarily, because it's not a great place to live. And that devalues the development costs. But there was no attention on the efficiency of the design. And that's the problem. Maintenance headache. If it's not efficient, the city has got all those public streets they're going to have to maintain forever. Or if those are private streets, guess what? The homeowner's cost goes forever. Who cares about safety? 0 seconds. That's how technology fits in. And that's where we're going to change your education to start thinking about these things and make you a better planner, better architect, better designer, better surveyor, better engineer, better real estate person, better construction management, and that's where all of this fits in. So, technology doesn't fit in very well. With the LandMentor system, it changes all of that because we will change and have you think differently in these processes. And these are the processes that your career is going to take you. So the first lesson is how to recognize waste. Now, in the LandMentor system that we hope you will download and review and learn and go through all the documentation, this is just one lesson. Where's the waste in this plan? And it's not in the cul-de-sac. Take a few seconds to look at it, and it should instantly impact you why this plan is so wasteful. And again, it's not in the cul-de-sac. And this plan was submitted is created by an engineer, went to a developer, went to a city, and nobody recognized the waste. Okay? The red streets have no frontage. So a street that has no frontage is 100% waste. If you're not fronting a street, you're not gaining a use of the street. The street is being built for no reason once you enter the neighborhood. These blue streets are half fronted. So that means only half of the street is being utilized for value. So then you add the waste in the cul-de-sac. In this plan, there is no cul-de-sacs. Where's the waste in this plan? Take a second. Well, there's hardly any red streets, so it's pretty efficient, but wait a second. Those gray streets are the only streets that are efficient. Everything else that's not filled in is 50% waste. 50% waste. So what happens is all of that street is waste. So both of these plans, one had about 1/3 of the streets being in the form of waste. This is about half the streets being in the form of waste. So what LandMentor does, when you start reading the documentation, we start going through the classes, this is just a taste of how to think differently, because the world isn't thinking this way. Lesson 2, taking that and how to recognize the waste and how to quantify, report it, and make a difference. Of course, we started out purpose intent. This is Brentwood, California. I don't have to remind you, famous for the OJ murders. Now, again, why is the purpose and intent so important? It's because everything following the purpose and intent is supposed to deliver the purpose and intent's purpose. So, it says something very interesting in Brentwood's purpose and intent. To encourage the provision of attractive and stimulating surroundings that will make Brentwood's residential areas enjoyable places to live. Keep that thought. Non-standard wording that tells us someone thought about their growth. So, is it enough? So let's take a look at a proposal in Brentwood.